Nero's very presence has altered the flow of history, beginning with the attack on the USS Kelvin, culminating in the events of today, thereby creating an entire new chain of incidents.
An alternate reality.
Precisely.
Hey everyone, and welcome to What Did I Miss? My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me today, where I'll be taking a look back at the film Star Trek that was released in 2009 and directed by J.J. Abrams from a script written by himself, Robert Orci, and Alex Kurtzman. Now, if you are new to this channel, you may not know that I am a huge fan of the Star Trek franchise, and because of this, I've obviously seen this movie multiple times before. But I realized that I had not watched it since the series Picard aired, which does add some context to many of the events seen in this film. Also, there is supposedly a fourth film in this series still in the works at Paramount, so there is a possibility that we will hear an announcement on the future of this cast soon from the studio. So here, I'll break down the film, including discussing scenes that were deleted or added to the novelization of the movie, as well as casting and how the movie came about. And of course, I will go over the many Easter eggs in this film and other connections to past iterations of Star Trek. But first, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button for me and help support the work that I do. If enough people like this video and watch it, I will create similar videos based on the next two films in the franchise, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. Development on a new movie in the Star Trek franchise began in 2006 when Paramount hired J.J. Abrams to create a new film based on younger versions of James Kirk and Spock that would have to be recast. J.J. Abrams had just completed work on the film Mission Impossible 3 with Robert Orci and Alex Kurtzman, so he brought them along to help write the screenplay. Before they were hired, Sam Raimi was also considered as an option to reboot the franchise, having successfully directed the Spider-Man films for Sony. In 2007, early on in pre-production, the decision was made to call the movie simply Star Trek and not include a subtitle, something that was very rare for a reboot to do at the time, but is now more commonplace. The producers on the film felt that by doing this, fans would understand that this was a new beginning and that they would not have to watch anything else before seeing this movie, which would give the film a broader audience upon its release. Early drafts of the script centered around James Kirk and Spock at Starfleet Academy and characters like Kirk's former commanding officer Gavorek, as well as a love interest named Carol Marcus, were also part of the story. Some elements of this script would remain in the final draft, such as Kirk and Spock first meeting after Kirk passes the Kobayashi Maru test, and of course Carol Marcus would end up appearing in the film following this one. At some point, Robert Orci came up with the idea of using an alternate universe to create new adventures for this crew, since, as he stated, the idea of multiple timelines was already a part of the Star Trek universe and specifically referenced the Next Generation episode Parallels, where the audience witnesses the emergence of multiple versions of the USS Enterprise D on screen at once that all originate from separate timelines. When designing the interior sets, one thing that the producers struggled with was how to depict this version of the future, partially because many of the technological advancements that have occurred over the past 25 years are based on technology that first appeared on Star Trek. So if the designers went too literal with their depiction, the technology of the 24th century may appear antiquated to what actually exists now. Instead, they decided to go with a sleeker design that looked more functional and futuristic, taking further inspiration from the spacecraft scene in the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. Casting the iconic roles were viewed almost as important as the story, and both William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy were made consultants in regard to the characters that they played, James Kirk and Spock respectively. Both were also considered to return as their characters, but in the end, Leonard Nimoy would be the only one that appeared in the film. Although both William Shatner as well as the producers on the film were willing to include him as well, in the end it was deemed too difficult considering the fact that James Kirk died in the film Star Trek Generations. An early draft of the script reportedly included a variation of the meeting between both versions of Spock at the end of the film, where the older version would produce a holographic device that displayed James Kirk as played by William Shatner. Besides Mr. Nimoy, the only other person that would return to play a role that they had previously played on Star Trek was Majel Barrett, who returned to voice the Enterprise computer. Sadly, though, the actress passed away less than 2 weeks after her involvement in the film was made public. The first new actor cast was Zachary Quinto as Spock. He had just achieved a lot of success thanks to his role in the series Heroes, where he co-starred with actor Greg Grunberg, who's a longtime collaborator with J.J. Abrams and also voices the role of James Kirk's stepfather in this film. Zachary Quinto really took his role as Spock seriously, and over the course of the production, he bound his fingers to practice the Vulcan salute, shaved his eyebrows, and grew and dyed his hair for the role. He would also go on to establish a strong relationship with Leonard Nimoy and the Nimoy family that I would like to get into if I get a chance to make follow-up videos about the sequels. Before he was cast, actor Adrian Brody also expressed an interest in playing the role. The next actor cast was Chris Pine as James Kirk, and many other actors were considered for the role before him, such as Chris Pratt, Matt Damon, Timothy Olyphant, and Galaxy Quest alum Sam Rockwell. Even though Chris Pine watched the original series before taking on the role, he decided to not just do a William Shatner impression and instead based his take on Tom Cruise's role from Top Gun, Pete Mitchell, along with Harrison Ford's portrayal of Indiana Jones. Zoe Saldana was cast as Uhura without an audition, partially because J.J. Abrams liked her role as a Trekkie in the film The Terminal. Surprisingly, this very influential character was never given a first name on the original series or any other movie before this film, which firmly establishes Uhura's first name as Nyota. This was also written as a sort of joke in the film, with James Kirk continually trying to find out Uhura's first name, only to learn it towards the end of the movie. Simon Pegg was another actor that the producers on this film were familiar with after he had just starred as Benji in the movie Mission Impossible 3, and he was cast as Montgomery Scott without an audition as well. Carl Urban was the last main actor to join the cast, and he took on the role of Dr. McCoy because he wanted to play a more comedic role after being known mostly as an action star up until that point. Writers Orci and Kurtzman have admitted that he was partially cast because they had worked together before on the series Xena Warrior Princess. It is possible that had Carl Urban not taken on the role of Dr. McCoy, where he showed his comedic side, that he may have missed out on his next big role, the character Billy Butcher on the very popular series The Boys. Initially, the part of the film's villain, Nero, was going to be played by Oscar winner Russell Crowe, but he ultimately dropped out. Another Australian actor, Eric Bana, was hired and admitted that he grew up a huge fan of Star Trek. J.J. Abrams allowed Bana to improvise his lines and speech patterns on set, which is pretty evident, especially when he speaks to the Enterprise for the first time.
I'm Captain Christopher Pike. To whom am I speaking?
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
Also, the character's name Nero is a nod to the Roman inspirations of the Romulans. Another intriguing member of this cast was the part of James' father, George Kirk, who ended up being played by a then little-known Australian actor named Chris Hemsworth. While Star Trek is the actor's first film credit, he had starred on an Australian TV series for many years up until this point. It would still be 2 more years until his breakout role as Thor in the MCU, and he has gone on to become a leading man in Hollywood. It is rumored that the planned 4th film in this series would have Hemsworth return as George Kirk to meet his son, but that script may or may not be the one that is still currently in production. Besides the design of the USS Enterprise, the interior design of the Romulan ship the Narada, as well as the design of the Romulans, were created with a specific vision. First, the ship was designed to look like a working-class ship and not a starship like the Enterprise, since the Narada is a mining vessel and not designed for exploration. Second, the Romulans were all given shaved heads and tattoos to distinguish them from the Vulcans that also appear in this film. In a comic book that served as a prequel to this movie, it was explained that the Romulans on the Narada covered themselves in tattoos in a ritualistic way to mourn their loved ones that died on Romulus. There's also a deleted sequence in the film that details what happened to the Narada after its battle with the USS Kelvin at the start of the movie. After George Kirk slammed the Kelvin into the Narada, it was left disabled in space and eventually was come upon by a squadron of Klingon birds of prey. The Klingons imprisoned Nero and his crew on the Klingon prison colony Rurapente, which also makes an appearance in the film The Undiscovered Country, while holding the Narada in orbit to study its advanced technology. This is the reason why when we see the interior of the ship, there's so much empty space, because over the course of 20 plus years, the Klingons have cannibalized most of the ship. But after Nero is able to calculate when Spock will arrive from the future, he escapes from Rurapente with his crew and destroys the pursuing ships. This is the event that triggers the Klingon distress call that Uhura picks up when she returns to her room, and she mentions it later on the bridge.
It's an emergency transmission.
Really?
Yeah. From a Klingon prison planet.
There was an attack. 47 Klingon warbirds destroyed by Romulans, sir, and it was reported that the Romulans were in one ship.
Sir, I intercepted and translated the message myself. Kirk's report is accurate.
While this scene does sound important, the reason that it was cut from the final film was that the producers on the movie had not decided on a design for the Klingons, since on the original series they looked very different from what they looked like in the original movie and thereafter. So because of this, in this deleted scene, every Klingon was wearing a mask, which seemed like a cop-out to the people that worked on the movie. However, the scene was still featured in a few trailers that led up to the movie's release. Even though this film is mostly set in an alternate universe, it has been referenced in the main Star Trek universe on the series Discovery as well as Picard. Star Trek Picard especially dealt with the fallout of the destruction of Romulus and how it affected Picard in the show's first season. The show revealed that Picard was attempting to help Spock rescue the inhabitants of the planet Romulus, but the Federation cut off their aid when it mattered the most. Because of this, the Romulans are scattered and scarce in the universe, and Picard is forever changed by the experience and eventually resigns from Starfleet. After initially being set to be released in the winter of 2008, the film was moved to May of 2009 after filmmakers liked what they had saw so much that they thought the film would appeal to a wider audience than previous Star Trek films. And they were correct, as this movie stands as the highest grossing Star Trek film to date. On an estimated budget of $150 million, the film grossed over $385 million, and at the time, it had the record for the highest first weekend of any film released in IMAX. It was also the first Star Trek film to win an Academy Award and receive 3 other nominations. Because of the hype surrounding the film, a sequel was announced 2 months before its release, which would become Star Trek Into Darkness and be released 4 years later in 2013, which was not as well received as this film, but if you would like to see a video like this about Into Darkness, make sure to let me know in the comments. So here are some other Easter eggs that are in the film that I have not yet mentioned. Since this movie starts with the birth of James Kirk, this is technically the second film to begin on James Kirk's birthday, with the other being Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Hikaru Sulu, who is played by one of the stars of Harold and Kumar, John Cho, tells Captain Pike that he has received fencing training. This is a reference to the character's infamous scene with a fencing sword in the original series episode, The Naked Time. The sequence where Nero drops a Centaurian slug down Captain Pike's throat is a tribute to the Seti eel scene from the movie The Wrath of Khan. When Spock Prime, or the character played by Leonard Nimoy, first meets James Kirk, he says,
"I have been and always shall be your friend."
Which is a callback to his last words in the same film, The Wrath of Khan.
I have been and always shall be your friend.
When Spock Prime and Kirk meet Scotty, he mentions that he misplaced an Admiral's Prize Beagle. This is a reference to the character Jonathan Archer from the series Star Trek Enterprise and his dog Porthos. J.J. Abrams has stated that he did have a plan to return the dog to the Admiral at a later point in the film series. Also, when they first meet Scotty, you can hear and then see a tribble on his desk. This small, furry, and frisky species was first introduced in the original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. Unlike Chris Pine's depiction of Captain Kirk, Zachary Quinto did attempt to mirror the performance of Leonard Nimoy as much as possible into his version of Spock. Besides stating the common Vulcan phrase, "live long and prosper," he also repeats the character's catchphrase, "fascinating," when he begins piloting the jellyfish ship.
Fascinating.
When discussing the new timeline, Quinto as Spock repeats a famous line from the character Sherlock Holmes. Spock Prime states the same line in the film The Undiscovered Country.
If you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains,
However improbable, must be the truth.
Will Wheaton, who played Wesley Crusher on The Next Generation and later appeared as a character on Picard and Lower Decks, voices several background characters in the film, like this one.
If you ignite the red matter,
I want Spock dead now!
At the end of the movie, Christopher Pike is in a wheelchair because of what happened to him on the Narada. This is meant to reference the fact that in the original series episode The Menagerie, it is revealed that Pike is confined to a wheelchair after an accident involving exposure to radiation. Well, that was everything I saw, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. If you enjoyed this video, then hit that like button and let me know what other movies I should break down in the comments. I also release a podcast every Monday named WDIM News that goes over what is new in the world of sci-fi and elsewhere, and links to it are also in the description below. Thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?